In my hands, I have two of the most highly anticipated Players irons of 2024, and in today's video, we're gonna test them and see how they stack up and compare against one another. So let's get right into it. Right guys, so in my opinion, there has very likely never been a hyped iron release like the 2024 Blueprint irons. They were spotted in summer of 2023 on the PGA Tour, and we have waited ages, it feels like, for these things to come to retail. And I have just gotten tons of requests to put these irons to the test, and that's what we're gonna do today. But quickly, let's go ahead and cover each of the models. Now, the first iron, and likely the most anticipated, is the Ping Blueprint S. This is gonna be Ping's signature cavity back, and an iron that many have touted as the replacement for the cult-like followed Ping S55 that came out over a decade ago. Now, a couple things I want to note about the Blueprint S. This iron is fully forged, which is something a lot of people have waited a very long time to see from Ping in terms of a cavity back. But in the 3, 4, and 5 irons, they actually have an undercut slot with an elastomer insert that kind of pushes a little bit away to the perimeter for added forgiveness. And the second iron we're going to be testing today is the Ping Blueprint T. This is taken over the original Blueprint as Ping's signature blade, still fully forged out of 8620 carbon steel, but with more of an emphasis on workability over the S. Now, we have both of these irons built up in pitching wedge, 7 iron, and 4 irons, and we're going to be testing them off grass using GC Quad to see how they stack up in real world conditions. All that said, we're out here on the driving range now, so let's get into testing. Alrighty guys, so the way we're going to work through this testing is we're going to start with the Blueprint T, pitching wedge, 7 iron, 4 iron, and then we'll move into the S and kind of see how they stack up and compare against one another. Looks, feel, numbers, the whole 9 yards, if you will. Now, as always, shafted up with the exact same shaft, specs are the exact same, lofts, lies, you name it. We are all dialed up, ready to go. Everything is in the position it should be in. All right, so starting with a Ping Blueprint T pitching wedge, taking a look down at this thing, very good shape. So first and foremost, the things I noticed, a little bit smaller blade length on this head. There's a little bit of belly in the leading edge, which is interesting. Usually Ping goes for a little bit more of a straighter look, so that's definitely a little bit different. In terms of offset, there is absolutely zero offset, maybe even some onset on this thing. It is maybe, if I was gonna critique anything, I would say on the slightest side, it is a little bit small from a blade length perspective, but aside from that, it is a really pretty looking pitching wedge, I have to be honest. All right, so that one, I wouldn't call that thin. I would call that a little bit on the lower grooves. That's probably gonna be a little bit of a spinny one. All right, so unfortunately, I don't think that one got picked up. All right, that was very nice. In terms of numbers, really good. 10,000 spin, 137 carry, 107 ball, 22 launch. So very solid numbers for me with a pitching wedge. I'm hopefully looking around, I'd like to say maybe 140-ish, 142. That one was a little bit on the spinnier side, which is kind of to be expected with these irons. I mean, because of the high bounce angles, you're very likely going to catch them a little bit lower on the face, which is going to make them spin up a little bit. Yeah, these are very interesting. Very, to me, similar to the Srixon Z Forged in terms of the turf interaction. I do feel like I can get pretty steep with these and they're not gonna dig on me. That being said, the soles are actually pretty narrow. So that's kind of the cool thing about these irons is they didn't need to make wide soles to make them not dig. They just made the bounce angle itself a little bit steeper. In terms of numbers there, 137 carry, 104 ball, 28 launch, 6,300 spin. Obviously that was probably a little bit of a misread in terms of the spin. Because we're going into the grain here, the spin can get a little wonky, but it's a little bit of a better test from a bounce angle perspective. We can really see if these will dig on us or not. We'll start to try to flight these a little bit. That's good. In terms of flighting it, I like that. 19 launch, so much lower launch angle, 104 ball, 134 carry, 9,500 spin. In terms of feel, I gotta be honest with you guys, they're not the softest feeling, at least in my opinion. I know that they're forged out of 8620 carbon, which is a pretty soft steel, but I've always felt like with Ping irons, they're a little bit on the firmer side for some reason. We'll go one more flighted with this pitching wedge. Yeah, again, I feel like I try to get steep and it's just very resistant to digging on a shot like that. 16 launch, very low, 9,600 spin, 105 ball, 136 carry. I mean, yeah, to me, that's exactly what this iron seems like. Much higher bounce angle, gonna be harder to get these into the ground. If you're somebody who really struggles with bottoming out early, or you struggle with getting a little bit too steep, that's where a bounce angle like this is gonna be really, really forgiving, really, really helpful. That is the Blueprint T pitching wedge. We'll go ahead and move up into the 7 iron now. Take a look down at this Blueprint T 7 iron, absolutely gorgeous. I mean, they've done done a really good job with the shaping of this iron. I don't think there's any offset. There might be a hair, but it's very, very minimal at most. Top line looks really good. Overall shaping really good, not too rounded. There is still a little bit of roundedness in the leading edge, which is interesting, but the rest of the head, you know, it's a straight top line, a little bit of a straighter toe area. It's just really good looking. Once again though, and similar to the pitching wedge, I mean, the blade length is short. If that's something that you don't like, me personally, I tend to like a little bit longer blade lengths. That is definitely something to think about for sure. I mean, it moves through the turf really well, especially this turf. Because we're into the grain, a lot of irons will tend to grab and dig very quickly, and these just don't seem like they're doing that. 16.7 launch, 126 ball, 169 carry, 8,400 spin, so a little bit high spin on that one. But again, I think some of the spin rates do have to do with the grass a little bit. You know, it's just hard to get super precise contact when you're into the grain. And so sometimes spin rates get a little high, sometimes they get a little bit low. It's just a little bit harder to predict. But man, these do seem pretty freaking good. 129 ball, 177 carry, 16.5 launch, 7,600 spin. I mean, once again with the feel, I don't think it's the softest feeling iron I've ever hit. I mean, I don't take it the wrong way. I wouldn't say these are like harsh feeling, but they definitely don't feel like the ball is melting into the face, if that makes sense. Now, ball speed being at 129 is very quick for this iron. Something important to note is that this 7-iron is 33 degrees as opposed to 34, which is what I normally play my 7-iron at, which could be the reason for a little bit more speed, but 129 is still very quick for a 7-iron. Usually for me, that's closer to my 6-iron, so very solid from a speed perspective. And once again, I mean, I wouldn't call that super thin, but definitely a little bit on the lower side of the face. 126 ball, pretty solid. For that to be a little bit of a lower face strike and only drop 3 miles an hour ball speed for a blade is really solid. 17 launch, 7,400 spin, 172 carry. That was really good. Very solid contact. To me, came out a little bit lower. Yeah, 16.3, 129, 177, 7,200. Really good numbers. I mean, this really does a good job in terms of a blade from a numbers perspective. Very controllable, very predictable, I would say, numbers-wise, which is kind of what you would expect. We'll try to flight these now. Ball back, like a 3/4 shot. 13 launch, much lower, 126, 173, 7,200, super solid. You know, I think if you're somebody who wants to play a blade, but you need a little bit higher bounce, you'd probably be between these and the Z-Forge 2. These do play a little bit wider because there's no relief on this sole, so that's definitely something to think about. And then aside from that, you know, there's a slight difference in feel, and then obviously the blade length is really the biggest difference. These are much shorter from heel to toe as opposed to the Z-Forge 2. We'll go ahead and try to hit a fade now, and then we'll try to hit like a bigger draw. Just super workable. I mean, that's what you could do with blades. 124, 166, 16.8, 8,400. Now we'll go bigger draw here. Yeah, I caught that a little thin. I mean, these definitely have a lot of bounce. I mean, there's no other way around it. And for me, like, the cool thing I thought about the Z-Forge 2 was it had a lot of lead edge bounce, but then there was a ton of relief, so it didn't play crazy high. These just, they play high. In terms of numbers there, 128 ball, 177 carry, 11.8 launch, 6,000. I mean, that was a thin one, but that's kind of what I'm talking about, because on a shot like that, when I'm pushing my path right, I'm usually going to be getting a little bit steeper. It just seems like this doesn't want to dig so much. All right, we'll try to get steep, see what we can do. It's just very resistant. I mean, there's no other way around it. It does not want to dig. 130 ball, 179, 13.1, 7,100. I mean, that's a hook for you. But yeah, man, these are high bounce. There's really no other way around it. All right, moving up into the 4-iron now. Taking a look down at this thing. This looks brutal to hit. I'm not gonna lie. Very short blade length. Again, the shaping's beautiful. It's just the blade length for me, especially in a 4-iron, that is just, it's harsh looking, man. I feel like if I miss this thing anywhere off center, a millimeter off center, it's gonna be very punishing. In terms of offset, there's definitely a little bit more of a progression. As you get into this 4-iron, you can definitely see some offset. I don't mind it in the 4-iron. It's not bad enough for me to complain. And if anything, it's gonna help you square the face. I always talk about that. So I don't mind it, but definitely the progression throughout the set is very noticeable, I would say. Now there is wind pushing out of the right, so that one is a big draw, but the wind's not helping me in terms of how it looks on camera, at least. In terms of numbers though, 141, 211, 11.4, 4,600, really solid numbers. I mean, I know that's only one shot, but that's a pretty long carry, 211 yards for me. Usually I'm sub 210 with a blade 4-iron, so definitely something to note there. Just a hair thin. You know what, I don't think pick that one up. Caught that a hair higher in the face. The grain definitely grabbed the leading edge a little bit. It's funny, it grabbed the leading edge, but it couldn't pull it down, and that's just due to the bounce. Really, really good numbers. 142, 214, 12.5, 4,500. I'll be honest, I mean, that's surprisingly long for a blade. But yeah, I mean, that's a thin one, and it's just so brutal. So brutal. Blades in a 4-iron is just, I mean, you got to be a little delusional to play one. 136, 204. Honestly, I'm very surprised they carried 204. 136 ball, 9.7 launch, 4,000 spin. I thought that that would have carried like 191 yards. That was like beyond thin. I'd really like to end on a decent one, just for my ego. I mean, that is the thing about this 4-iron. The extra bounce makes it more playable, because I do find this thing a little bit hard to bottom out early with. 142 ball, 212, 11.7, 4,800. I mean, me personally, the reason I don't play a blade, obviously it's the forgiveness, it's the height. But the other things is I would like to see this carry closer to 220. On a decent strike with this one, it's like 212, 214 if I miss it. Although the numbers are still decent, they're just too close to my 5-iron, if that makes sense. But nonetheless, I mean, this is a very solid blade set of irons. High bounce, very short blade lengths, very minimal offset. They look beautiful. I definitely could possibly see myself playing them in the short clubs, but I don't think there is any chance in hell I would play that in a 4-iron. Too much for me. Now we're going to move up into the ones that I think a lot of you guys are here for, and that is the Ping Blueprint S. We'll start with the pitching wedge, and we'll just see how we get on with it. All right, taking a look down at this pitching wedge. Very similar shape to the Blueprint T. I would say pretty much the exact same shape, a little bit of belly in the leading edge, straighter top line. I mean, there's a Scotia roundedness, but the biggest difference is the size. I mean, this looks way bigger to me than the Blueprint T. I mean, side by side, it doesn't look that much different, but just in my hands, looking down at it, this thing looks massive. This thing to me almost looks bigger than the 4-iron. I don't know if it's just because that 4-iron was so damn small or what, but I mean, yeah, in terms of shaping, it's beautiful. It really does look good. I have to be frank. There's definitely no offset on this thing. If anything, there's a little bit of onset because of the belly and the leading edge. It just looks really good. Hold that a hair. Man, I'm struggling picking up golf balls today with the quad. Okay, well, little thin. Man, it's just not picking these up. All right, I've moved the quad. Let's see if we can get some numbers. I do not know why it's not picking it up. There we go. In terms of numbers, 112, 143, 21.5, 10,000. Seems like a little bit more ball speed out of this, a little bit more carry as well compared to the T. I know that's only one shot. 143, 21.6, 9,400, 111. To me, it's funny. The lofts are the exact same, but because of the construction, seems like I'm getting a hair more carry out of this Blueprint S over the T. Now, to be honest with you guys, in terms of the sizing, I know I said that those were really small, but I think I do prefer the Blueprint T from a sizing perspective in the pitching wedge. It looks a little bit more short iron-like, in terms of, at least in terms of what I'm used to, if that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, that one was super steep. It seemed like the grass really wanted to pull the leading edge down, and it just couldn't. I mean, that's kind of what I'm talking about with these higher bounce angles on these irons. 112 ball, 142, 10,000, 21.8. I mean, really good numbers. The bounce is just such an interesting thing. It's going to be the reason that they work for some people and are really good, and it's going to be the reason that they do not work for other people and they are really bad. But for me personally, I haven't really minded it. I mean, they are a little high. I wish they were maybe a skosh lower bounce than they are, but they haven't been too much, I would say. But let's go ahead and try to flight these, see what we can do. We'll go 2 ball back. 139, 19, 108, 10,000. Definitely to me seems like, from a flightability perspective, the T does a better job. 17 launch, 144, 110, 90, 100. You can definitely flight them. I think that if you're super into flighting shots, you'd be better off with the T. But definitely, if you're somebody who's not super into flighting shots, but you just want to be able to do it every now and then, you'll definitely get away with the S. That is for sure. Okay, that's the S pitching wedge. Let's go ahead and move up into the 7-iron now. Taking a look down at this, in terms of the size of the head, looks really good. I prefer this size of head over the T. It's a little bit bigger, looks a little bit more pleasing to my eye, especially in like a mid, longer iron. Looks like it's going to offer you a little bit more forgiveness. I mean, the offset is definitely noticeable, but it's not bad in this 7-iron. To me, it's plenty playable, if that makes sense. Shaping, once again, really good. I mean, these look beautiful from a shaping perspective. 15.7, 128, 177, 7,200. Yeah, I just hitting one shot. I personally think that if I were to combo these, I would probably switch it to 7-iron. Again, only one shot, but to me seems more playable. 130 ball, 179, 18.3, 6,900. Definitely can get a little bit more out of this ball speed and carry wise over the tee. It's not much. I want to say a mile an hour if you were on the high side, maybe 2, and probably 2-3 yards of carry. Not much. It really isn't much. But one more full one, then we'll try to work it a little bit. You know what's interesting is this 7-iron doesn't feel like it plays with quite as much bounce as the tee. Like it feels like it moves through the turf a little bit better. It's weird because I think the sole itself is wider. Yeah, it seems a little bit wider. Oh man. Yeah, I mean, just looking at the angle, it doesn't look like it has as much bounce. Maybe that's one of the reasons I like it more in this 7-iron because it doesn't seem like it plays with quite as much bounce. 128 ball, 176, 16.9, 7,300. Really good. That was kind of a slight miss. That was comparable to some of the shots I hit with the tee that I think we're dropping to like 126 ball. So definitely, I think you can get a little bit more ball speed out of these. Seems a hair lower spin, not much, just a hair. That was low faced, kind of pushed it. Not a really good swing, but 128, 174, 16.3, 7,700. Yeah, I think just a little bit more ball speed, touch more carry, touch higher launch, touch lower spin. Very close, but subtly different. And also a little bit less bounce, like I mentioned. All right, we're gonna go cut now. Plenty workable. I mean, to be honest with you, it does feel like it wouldn't be quite as workable as the tee, like just moving through the ground. And I think because of the CG, it's spread out a little bit more. But I would say for the majority of people, it's plenty workable. 125 ball, 164, 19.3, 9,100. A little bit high spin there. Again, though, like I've mentioned, I think that's just due to being into the grain. We'll go one more cut. That's good. Fighting the wind. 16.1, 161, 121, 9,200. Now let's go bigger draw. Yeah, these definitely play with less bounce. It's slight, but you could see on those Blueprint T 7-irons I was trying to kind of hook, it just would not get into the ground, and that one just got pretty easily into the ground without much effort. Come on, thing. Let's go one more hook. All right, that was a good one to end on. 131, 181, 13.6, 7,100. Yeah, I mean, it's minimally less workable. But aside from that, I mean, the numbers are very close. I kind of mentioned the difference in numbers already. Let's try to hit one flighted one. 15.2, 129, 177, 7,400. Yeah, I think that pretty much confirms exactly what I've been feeling. All right, moving up into the 4-iron now. Now this excites me a little bit because that T 4-iron felt unplayable. So I'm very curious to see if that changes with this S. I gotta switch gloves. I think I'm on glove like 7 today. All right, taking a look down at this 4-iron. Size-wise, a little bit bigger. To me, looks good from a size perspective. Shaping-wise, again, looks good. Really nice shape. I don't like the offset. This 4-iron has a lot of offset, and it just does not look great to me. Personally, I think what would have been really cool is if they took the T offset and put it on the S head. To me, that makes a ton of sense. I just do not like how much offset this 4-iron has. But hey, you know what? If it performs well, I could care less. Ugh, that's kind of a crappy swing. That's a nice massive draw right there. You know, but what was really interesting about that first shot is you can feel the difference. In these longer irons, they've taken out a portion of the cavity and they've tried to push it toward the perimeter to really, they say, to enhance forgiveness. I mean, I think it's only 10 grams out of a 230, 250 gram head in these longer irons. I don't think it's gonna make much of a difference, but to me, this feels different. Like you can kind of tell that there's an insert behind the face, if that makes sense. All right, I moved the quad. I think it should get these. Yeah, without a doubt, you can feel that insert. That was super thin. Yeah, and the numbers, you know, are a little bit better than the T. That's 208 carry, 11.5, 4,400, 138, and that was a relatively thin shot, like pretty decently thin. It didn't feel super harsh though because of the insert behind the face. So definitely something to note from that perspective. You know, for me personally, I don't even know if I would play this in a 4-iron. I think I'd rather just play the 230 because I think the offset is pretty much the same or at least similar, and the head's a little bit bigger, probably even easier to hit than this. No, that sucks. Same numbers as the last one, 38, 208. Very similar numbers to the T. 143, 211, 12.2, 5,200. I mean, yeah, it definitely seems more forgiving than the T, but it's still a lot, in my opinion, to try to hit this in a 4-iron. And the offset is just throwing me off a little bit. No, bro. I mean, this is still hard to hit in a 4-iron. 208, 140, 10.4. It's funny, the numbers of the T were actually pretty much right in line with this. Granted, I haven't really hit one of these that great yet. I think if I hit one really good, I might get like 216 out of it. But yeah, this is still brutal to hit. You gotta be a ball striker, bro. Finally, a good one. Not super high though. 214, I said 216. I think that was the same as our longest one with the T. 12, 142, 4500. I mean, the numbers are eerily similar to the T. This does look a little bit bigger. It looks a little bit easier to hit. But to be honest with you guys, like, I don't like the offset enough to consider playing the T in the 4-iron, because I don't know if this is like that much more forgiving. Like, just immediately thinking about it, I think a pretty ideal setup would be T, pitching wedge through 8-iron, S, 765, and then the 230 in the 4. That's like my immediate thoughts. I think the 230 would give you enough forgiveness in the 4-iron. I think the S is a little bit nicer in the middle clubs just because it gives you a little bit of help, but it's not anything crazy. And then I really like the workability and flightability of the T in the short clubs. Like, to me, that seems, if I had to choose right this second, that's probably where I would go. And the cool thing, and where I do have to give Ping a lot of credit, is they loft matched all three, the 230, S, and T, which most companies, you would never see anything like that. So I do really give Ping an infinite amount of credit for that. We'll try to hit one more to end, one more good one. Yeah, I think it's a tiny bit more forgiving than the T, but it's really not anything crazy in terms of forgiveness. I think if you were like, I want to play a T pitching wedge through 5-iron, like, just play in the 4-iron. I don't think I personally don't think you're going to get an insane amount of forgiveness out of this S over the T in a 4-iron. To me, if you wanted to do that, just jump to the 230, because that 230 is such a good iron. It's so easy to hit. It feels great. It looks really good. It looks very forgiving, just super confidence inspiring, if that makes sense. In terms of numbers, 141, 212, 11, 4, 4500. I mean, pretty much exactly where we've been. It's not like this is carrying, you know, 6, 7, 8 yards further than the T. So there it is, guys. That is our testing of the Ping Blueprint S&T. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Let's go over my final conclusions and kind of talk about these irons, and I'll give you my final opinions on them. All right, guys, so let's go ahead and talk through some different categories, and I'll give you my overall opinions on these new blueprints. So starting with looks, I mean, both of these are absolutely beautiful irons. The backings are modern yet sleek. I really love the shaping of both of these heads, and I would say down at address, both of them look really good for the most part. So starting with the T, I mean, the only real issue I have with this iron is the size of it. It is pretty small in terms of head size, blade length, and whatnot. And like I said earlier, me personally, I do prefer a little bit of a bigger head size, even in a blade. But I think if you're somebody who really likes a smaller head, you're gonna absolutely fall in love with how these Blueprint Ts look. Now, the S is definitely a bit more appealing to me in terms of size, just offers a little bit more confidence, inspiration down at address. The real issue I have with this iron is the excessive offset in the longer clubs. Now, I understand why Ping is doing it, but I just really think that for the type of player this iron is appealing to, it's just not really that necessary. And for me personally, it is something that would keep me from playing this in a 3, 4, and 5 iron specifically. As far as feel goes with both of these heads, I would describe them as being on the firmly solid end of the soft spectrum. You know, they don't have that melty soft feel through impact, but I wouldn't call it harsh either. I would just say kind of a solidly soft thud through impact, if that makes sense. Now, what's really interesting is the feel actually changes a decent amount in the longer irons of the Blueprint S. They have that undercut cavity with the elastomer insert, and in my opinion, the feel changes to a softer feel, very similar to the i230s. Getting into turf interaction now, and in my opinion, the bounce and soles of these irons really fit a pretty specific segment of golfer. Starting with the T, I mean, this is pretty simply a high bounce blade iron. It's really cool because it's very hard to high face, something that you usually do not see in a blade, and in my opinion, makes this iron really, really consistent. Being able to easily catch the golf ball on those lower grooves is really underrated in my opinion, and gives you great control over launch and spin, and in turn flighting and curving of the golf ball. Now, with the Blueprint S, although this has a slightly wider sole, I don't think it plays with quite as much bounce as the T, but it's definitely still up there from a bounce angle perspective. Now, why I like that is usually somebody who's playing this iron isn't going to want to be quite as manipulative as a T player, and in turn, they're not going to need to catch it quite as low on the face, but it still allows you enough bounce to have some sloppiness in terms of low point and get away with it results-wise. All that said, I think depending on turf conditions and swing type, these irons will either be really awesome or really rough. You know, if you're somebody who plays in softer conditions, more grainy conditions, and you're shallower, these should be just fine. Or if you're playing firmer conditions and you're steeper, these should still be really solid. But if you're somebody who plays in firmer conditions and you're shallower, I do think you're going to struggle with these irons in terms of the bounce angle. As far as forgiveness goes, the Blueprint T is pretty simply a blade. I don't think anybody is buying this for the forgiveness, and frankly, I could not possibly recommend that you do buy this for the forgiveness, but the one saving grace of this iron is the bounce angle. I think if you're somebody who really doesn't have the best control over your low point, but you love blades, you really want to play blades, these irons become a lot more playable than others on the market because of how steep that bounce angle is. Now, in terms of forgiveness, this with the S. You know, I think you will absolutely get away with more miscues in the mid and long irons with this over the Blueprint T. But I'll be honest, in the 4-iron, it really wasn't quite as forgiving as I hoped it would be. You know, I really only felt like it was minimally easier to hit in that 4-iron over the tee. And so I think for the majority of people, if you're looking for extra height, extra forgiveness in your longer clubs, you'd very likely be better off just jumping straight to the i230s. As far as workability goes with these irons, I mean, the Blueprint T is about as easy to work as any other blade I've tested, which is largely in part due to the bounce, just able to catch it on those lower grooves, which is super important when you're trying to have control over launch and spin and in turn curve and flight ability. The S, on the other hand, you can definitely move it. If you want to hit it high, you can, low, right, left, right, and it's enough for the majority of people, but I would say it just doesn't offer you quite as much control as the Blueprint T does. So that pretty much covers everything, guys. I think for the most part, these are pretty darn solid irons and probably one of my favorite players' iron releases Ping has ever done. I'd say as a whole, they're just pretty specific in terms of who they're gonna fit with regards to the bounce and who they're gonna appeal to in terms of looks. Now, me personally, I don't think there's any way I would play just one of these iron models throughout the entirety of the set. I think it's pretty clear there's been attributes I really like and things I really don't like about each iron. And so for me personally, if I was gonna play a full set of Pings, it's very likely I would go with the T, S, and 230 combo set. And you know, that's where I give Ping all the credit in the world because they're one of the only companies that has loft matched all three of their players' irons, making blending sets, comboing sets very easy and super doable. You know, the thing is, I like the T in the short clubs, I like the S in the mid clubs, and if you've seen my i230 review, I'll go ahead and link it in the description below. I really liked those in the longer clubs. So being able to blend them very easily, pretty awesome. And frankly, I just don't understand why it's taken this long for an OEM to do this, why other OEMs haven't caught on and haven't been doing this. Doesn't really make any sense to me, but we're here now, and I really do hope to see other OEMs start to do this in the future. Nonetheless, guys, that's a video. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, I would love to hear your opinions on these irons if you've had the chance to test them or you're considering them for your bag in 2024. So go ahead and drop those in the comments down below. If you have any questions, again, drop them in the comments down below or shoot me a DM via Instagram. If you liked the video, be sure to give it a like. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel and you click that notification bell so you are notified anytime that we post a new video. Additionally, make sure you're following us on our other social media channels, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. Always great content on those channels as well. We'll catch you in the next video. Peace.